Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the show. Today I've got a special guest here with me in the studio. His name is Dickie, and before I invite him to say a few words to you, I just want to go ahead and do a little bit of an introduction of how we met and why he's here, and then we'll jump in to talk about what Doug's been inventing, the why behind it, and then how it can benefit you. And so Doug and I just met him actually this morning. So we're just getting to know each other. And a friend of mine called me about 2 weeks ago. He had been researching Doug's product, which is Carbon 1. And he calls me and says, "You've got to check this out." So Doug was in town in Salt Lake. And so we got on the phone. We talked for about 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, I realized I needed to have him on the show and do a face-to-face because he's very knowledgeable. And I like the practice. I like the concept behind this idea. And so many of you know that when it comes to lawn care, I've been looking for years to find a better way to help everyone find that green, healthy lawn that they want, but without all the extra runoff, without too much products, without, those type of things. And so I constantly looking at compost teas, other things to, conditioners to help sweeten it so we can bring down some of the nitrogen, et cetera. Anyway, as we were talking about the product, I just kind of paused him and said, "Hey, why don't you come in and we're going to do this?" So Doug, welcome. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Appreciate having you here on this Saturday, cold morning. So Doug, your product is Carbon 1.
Yes.
And if I understand correctly, you came up with the concept, and were you in a lab testing things? Tell me about the creation of the product, whatever you can tell me.
Sure. In 2002, I found another guy that had a humic acid product, had some neat responses on some plants. Sold his product until about 2008, and he went out of business. Just some bad decision making. His product went away. The company that bought the manufacturing plant stopped producing that product. And so I had a bunch of farmers that I was dealing with, and they said, "We need another product." And a friend of mine who is a potato farmer said, "I'll pay you to take some time to figure out the product." So I started looking at each of the items that we wanted in the product. And at the time, very few people were looking at carbon as an important factor in plants. Their view was, well, the plant photosynthesizes carbon out of the air. That's all the carbon they need. As I started to study and learn about carbon, it led me to start looking at energy as the factor that really makes plants grow. They're trying to acquire energy from the sun and make it into a usable chemical energy, which then goes to the soil. As I studied that, I realized that the biology and the soil there's three components: the plant, the biology, and the soil, and they're all symbiotic. The plant needs the nutrients from the soil. It has to feed the biology to make those nutrients available to then bring it into the plant. A lot of people think that water just flows into a plant for free, but the plant has to expend energy to get water to come in. The more nutrients in the water, the more energy it has to expend. And so what I did is I looked at getting energy to the plant. We already do that with nitrogen. The problem is the nitrogen grows foliage. And so we need to get energy in the plant via carbon, the way that it normally does. But you can't give a plant carbohydrate, which it makes. It won't respond to it. So I started looking at ways to produce the carbon component similar to what sugar is. And I found some food-grade ingredients that would respond with the plant. I mixed them together. It took me about almost 2 years to come up with a process. We're going directions nobody else is going, and what we ended up with is a near food grade. Okay. So I could say it's food grade because it is, but I don't want to have to.
Yeah, I understand.
With
the near food grade. Yeah,
right. So it's a product you could drink and you would be just fine. You would actually be healthier. And it has materials in there that essentially have a lot of energy attached. So when the plant receives it, or the biology or the soil, it expends its energy at that place, and you get a response. So if the soils are really alkaline or caliche like they are here in Utah, it requires the plant to give up a lot of energy. With our product, we're providing the energy source, so the plant doesn't have to. You talked about using compost tea. In growing the compost tea, they're using a sugar source to feed the biology to make that happen. Once it runs out of energy, the plant's going to have to fund the breakdown of the material in the soil. So adding a bunch of compost can also have a negative effect because there's no energy source.
Right.
So we're providing that with a nutrient supply, mainly carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, the components of sugar. And that's essentially what our product does. And the results are very quick, and responses are 99 out of 100 are amazing.
Okay, so, and we're gonna jump in even more technically into the product, but I have to ask a question on what you just said. You said, I think you said it was about 2001 when you, did I catch that right?
2002 when I started selling somebody else's product, 2008 when I made my own.
Okay, so '08. So were you always an inventor, a creator? Was it something you just said, wow, everybody's focused on nitrogen, but we're not utilizing what's in the soil? Like, how do you all of a sudden create a product? Where does that come from?
It was a daunting task. A friend of mine said, "I'll pay your bills for 6 months while you try to come up with this product." He was buying product from me and needed it for his farm.
But why did he come to you? Did you already?
We were partners in the previous company.
You were partners, and he knew that you understood the soil science part of it to a degree.
He said if anybody could come up with a replacement product, it'd be me. I told him it'd take about 3 months. It took a total of 3 years. When I decided to start the manufacturing process, it was very difficult to, without a large chemistry background.
Right.
There was a lot of learning lessons. And I would call friends who did have a PhD in chemistry and say, if I'm going to mix this ingredient with this one, how would you do it? And so I reached out to a lot of people to find out what the big no's were. Well, one of the things, I hired this chemist in 2014, PhD, brilliant guy, worked for 3M Corporation, and I wanted him to manufacture the product while I went out and talked to people. He's watching me go through the recipe and produce it, and he's like, no, you can't add this to that. And I said, well, this is what's going to happen. He says, no, we learned that you can't do that. And so I went ahead and did it, showed him, and he's like, oh, that's amazing. How did that work? And there was 3 or 4 instances like that where you know better as a chemist that you don't do this to this. And in my case, I did it because I get the proper result. And it changed his thinking.
Pause for one. I want you to continue, but I have to just point that out. So here's a guy who really doesn't have a background in chemistry. He's got a fascination with soil and trying to make it better. And he's reaching out to his friends who are PhDs who spent years and money going to school, and they tell him no. He doesn't listen, and he taps into he finds something incredible. I think I love that part of the story because most people would say, why would you go against? I have the schooling, the background, but today a lot of people are creating incredible products, even in the lawn care industry, literally by just making them up recipes in their kitchen, just this trial and error process.
That's correct.
Anyway, I love it. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, there was one instance where I added another component to the mix. This is early 2009. And then I couldn't breathe.
So it comes with some failures.
I had to crawl out of the garage, but I survived it, and I learned that you don't do that.
Yeah.
But from the standpoint of, I knew what I wanted. I wanted something that wouldn't harm anything, that would feed biology. And in the end, what we're doing is we're feeding the biology what the plant might feed it. So instead of feeding it sugar, which is a very low energy, consistent, stable carbohydrate, and we're feeding it like super duper cheesecake, if you will. So there's so much energy released, we can trigger mechanisms in the plant, like a foot of new root growth in a period of a couple weeks. So if your tree is not growing because the soil's nasty, it used to be a roadway,
Right.
we can grow roots into that soil. I can grow roots right through rock, as plants do in nature.
Can you tell me, and for the listeners, how important is it to focus on that root development for the health of a plant? And do you feel like a lot of people in the industry have that focus, or is this a newer concept, or where are we on the?
It's a very good question. Prior to the 40s, everything was about carbon in farming.
Okay.
You had to provide, if the land played out, it wasn't because it played out a nutrient, it played out a carbon. When you take 50 ton of potatoes off the field, you're taking 49.5 ton of carbohydrate. Only a small amount of the nutrients actually leaving with potatoes. And so this organic material that's in the soil that the biology need, if you're putting it into the plant and taking it or into a yield, let's say potatoes, and you're taking it off the field, after 2 or 3 years, you're not going to have enough organic matter in that soil to provide for the biology that are going to provide nutrients to that plant and water uptake. And so we rotate our crops. We put corn and wheat in, or we're putting more carbon back in the soil. This is one of the fixes to the commercial farming. When we're doing grass or trees around the home, we're not doing that rotation. Now we can mulch our lawn where we're putting the material back in, but most of that's nutrient from the leaf. And so you have to look at both the plant and the soil and the biology as 3 separate components that need each other. And the plant provides the energy source to the bacteria, also provides an energy source to make the nutrients available. And if there's not enough energy for the plant, let's say a bad year, or it's cool and wet, or it was a very cold fall or a long winter, then that plant is weak when it comes out in the spring. And so it's only going to push a little bit. If I can come in and supplement an energy source via carbon, which is what our product does, I can get more root growth, I can set larger leaves on the plant. All those decisions are made by the root extension. I can boost biological activity. I can cycle the nutrients so the soil is more fluffy and not a hard pan. I can break down salts, which are the fertilizer results. All of these benefits happen when you use carbon with energy. If you use nitrogen with energy, you just simply push more foliage. Phosphate, potassium, most of these nutrients are all for foliage. And so we're basically boosting the other half of the plant, which makes all the decisions for the top of the plant.
So in a good whether it's for a lawn care company, a good program, or a homeowner,
Yes.
in a good plant health, you need both. You need to really focus a lot of energy on the root system and some on the foliar side. Do you see then this product, this Carbon One, being tied in with? So let's say I'm a homeowner, or do you sell directly to homeowners?
Online.
Online, okay.
Mostly we go through distributors.
Okay, so we'll talk more about distributors. So let's say a company buys your product. How am I going to maximize the Carbon One in? Is it combining with a fertilizer or a humate or a compost tea, or is it standalone? Like, just for people who are trying to figure out, how do I bring carbon and Carbon One into my program or my plant health?
That's a good question. So in nature, early in the spring of each year, the plant pushes roots.
Okay.
Depending on how much energy it has, pushes a certain amount of roots. That determines the size of the leaves, the amount of leaves. Everything in the plant's determined by that initial root flush. And then the foliage grows as a response. That's where the nutrients are needed. And then in the fall, it pushes roots again. That's one ring of a tree or one growth cycle. Our product is most important at those 2 root flush timing.
So spring and fall.
Spring and fall. If you have a problem at any time, it's almost always because the plant is lacking energy. The sugar concentration is lower in the plant, so it can't defend itself against bugs. It's stressed in the sun. If I can boost it, like if I give you an extra $500 a month, it's going to boost your financial benefit. But I also have the ability to give you $50,000 one time, which, you buy a new car, there's something major. We can apply more product to trees and plants and bring them back from near death, or we can just simply use a small amount of product at a couple different timings to boost the health. And it boosts, like in flowers and roses, we can determine whether the rose is 9 or 10 inches in diameter, or there's 500 1-inch diameter roses. That timing I can affect because I'm using carbon.
And so I actually have seen some of the results. There's a couple videos on their website, but there's also some pictures that Doug's just shown me of some really sad-looking trees here in Utah. And within, was it about a year? How long did that first tree really start popping?
Within about 4 months, it was back. The picture you saw was 2 years later.
Okay, so 2 years, and it was day and night. I don't know if I've seen a tree that looking that robust and healthy anywhere around here. So really, there's some proof there. Really intriguing. Okay, so carbon one, there's this idea that what the soil really needs is some carbon to unlock even the nutrients that are locked up in the soil. Is that correct? Does this help unlock nutrients already in the soil that aren't being utilized by the plant?
Yes. Nature uses carbon as the energy carrier in almost everything. We consume carbohydrates. Even fats and proteins are basically used to be carbohydrates.
Okay. Would you say, can I replace the word carbon with energy or not exactly? I'm trying to simplify it even more for other people.
Everybody hates the word energy because it means it's sort of like love. There's so many examples, right? We talk potential or kinetic and when I say energy, do you eat the box or the pizza? You eat the pizza, right? You don't naturally have an inclination to eat the box, even though there's some energy in the in the cardboard. You're after the proteins, the carbohydrates, and the fats. So your body needs a constant energy supply. You're going to eat it. It's going to go into your system. The bacteria are going to break it down, produce amino acid chains. Your body's going to absorb them and continue to grow. Same way with a plant. The plant isn't, of course, eating. It's making its own carbohydrate energy source. And in the very beginning, as I started to study photosynthesis, a lot of people say, well, I'm adding this fertilizer to create more photosynthesis. It doesn't happen that way. Photosynthesis is 4 items. Surface area of the leaf, which is determined by the root system early on. Okay. Heat units, which is a measurement of 2 or 3 items, including how much sunlight and the intensity and the temperature. CO2 percentage, which is pretty much constant. You're not going to change it. In California, they pump CO2 into the greenhouses to improve yield. And then the 4th is water. The only real factor you're going to change is the water uptake, which is the size of the root mass. If we can boost the root mass, we can boost the water, we get more photosynthesis. Many of the leaves you'll notice on a tree close, or they're turned away from the sun. That means the root system isn't bringing up enough water. Right. The leaf has to close and turn away from the sun. This, if we can develop a large root mass, which is almost always a problem, we can get more photosynthesis. Our trees, our plants become really healthy. They start to protect themselves, so we're talking less of the insecticides needed, less of the fungicides needed, more beauty, more CO2 extraction out of the air and put into the soil. So for the green industry, it's really a benefit to pull CO2 out of the air.
So tell me if this is accurate in kind of giving a rough, simple explanation of this. Is it that with, so we'll talk, I'd like to talk lawn and trees for a minute.
Sure.
Too, and specifically with the product. But so with a lawn, are you suggesting that with a good fertilization program and a good, accurate, irrigation program, there's a lot of great things happening, soil base and top growth, but it's really this element of this carbon that's missing to really unlock everything? Am I anywhere near a...
No, I think that's correct. The challenge is early in the spring when we're pushing roots, if for some reason during that 2-week period when the roots would grow, if it cools down and the biology's not active, just because of nature having to cool down during that time, your roots aren't going to grow. So when it warms back up, it's past that timing. So now you're moving on with a plant that has a third of the root system that it should have had. So now you get to the summer, and what's going to happen, you're not drawing water from very deep, the roots are minimal. You're constantly cutting the top of the plant off. You're using fertilizer to grow the top of the plant.
And you're mowing it every
week.
5 to 7 days at times.
And people love them really short where they're not cooling the soil. Your grass is going to turn yellow in the summer. It's going to look horrible. It's going to die off because the root system during that period of time was limited due to nature.
Right.
So we're counting for now nature to make that decision for us.
And especially here in Utah, I mean, some areas that, we go up at the Park City area, you got an elevation of some of our property, 7,000 plus.
Correct.
So we're close to the sun. It's very dry. There's no humidity. And so one of the main problems we have, especially in lawn care, but I think with trees and everything, is just this drought stress. This time of year, like you're saying, where we're going into the summer, the roots are weak. Things are struggling. I mean, if you go and stand out in this Utah heat for an hour in the sun, you're gonna be melting. It's brutal out there. So imagine what it's doing to the plants. How can this help counteract that drought stress? Could you sell this to people who are looking for a solution for these drought stress spots that pop up in the lawn?
Yeah, so the land care guy that you hired to come in and take care of your lawn, instead of putting on nutrient early on, you put on our product. It's going to force the roots to grow 6 inches to a foot on demand. It has no choice. It's going to grow those roots as a natural response. And then the nutrients are now more available. So now the nutrient use through the summer is the plant takes up more of it. It's healthier. It's green. It's also hardier. One of the other points that you make is when that root system is stressed, almost always you get mildew or snow mold or some other disease that's going to step in because it's a weak plant. Our product strengthens the plant, so then that is no longer an issue. So we come in when there's snow mold, and within a week or so we fix that issue. Simply by forcing the roots to grow, the plant gets healthy, the mildew and the mold have no more of a food source. And so the lawn care professional can come in and force the roots to grow independent of the weather or the soil, and then it makes his whole life easier. Right. He sees that 1 or 2 or 3 trees in the yard that are struggling because of the same issue. The root system didn't push because of the weather. He goes, he does a treatment on the tree pushes roots, now that tree's healthy all summer long. And then in the fall, same way, he treats it again to force the roots to grow, to develop and store energy for that winter.
Awesome. Let's talk about the professional, the lawn care or land care professional or the company that you hire, because I would be one of them. I have some companies here in Utah, and this has been a massive problem for the last almost decade. It seems to be getting worse. There's 2 problems, and I want to see if Carbon One can help with that. The biggest one is, like we were saying, you get into the summer, and you guys know what I'm talking about. Just all of a sudden you get these brown spots that just start popping up, and you go, hey, I've been fertilizing, I've been hiring companies, I've been running my water day and night. Why do I have these spots? And so there's been products like Revive. There's products, there's some locally made products here in Layton for that. Could this work as a standalone? So I want to make sure I have this right. Is this something you would apply before those spots come up? So is this so you would apply this maybe in May when it's the lawn's still feeding and healthy, or is it can you apply it in July when we have drought stress and it's really under attack?
You can apply it anytime. Just as if I give you $500 anytime in the course of the year, you're going to be able to benefit from that. Of course, if I give it to you when you're most poor, then it's more of a benefit to you. We found that most of these other products are great products, but they have they're kind of a one trick, if you will. They boost biological activity, or they add a food source for the biologicals for one time, which is a humic acid or a fulvic acid or something along those lines. Those are beneficial. Those do benefit. But we're feeding the plant more than the soil. The soil will change. When I take a blueberry plant that lives in a 4.5 pH soil, and I move that plant out and I put an apple tree in place of it. The soil changes to 6.5 naturally. The plant changes the soil. The soil doesn't change the plant. And so it all has to do with hydrogen ions being emitted off the root tip and the temperatures at which the environment affects it. We treat the plant to force roots, to change the soil, to strengthen the plant. And many of these things are useful. One of the things we're not adding is we're not adding much nitrogen. We're not adding much potassium. Those are components that you can add in a very inexpensive way with your regular lawn care professional. What we're trying to do is strengthen the tree or the grass or the bushes. Let's say you have a hedge, and the side that faces the sun has beautiful leaves on it,
Right.
but the backside doesn't. Well, we can spray the backside of that hedge with our product. The roots are going to grow. It's going to push new leaf mass, and you're going to be able to develop a leaf mass on the backside of that hedge where nature would not do that because the sun's not facing it.
Awesome. So in that exact situation, if I was a homeowner or a professional and I saw that hedge, would I spray the whole plant or would I spray just the backside?
You could do both.
What would you do? Like, would you just go ahead and hit the whole plant? Or?
I'd hit the whole plant.
Okay. It's just as easy. I just didn't know.
Yeah. A lot of our pictures are a plant with, let's say, 200 leaves, maybe an inch in diameter and size. We'll bark treat that. We'll spray it on the bark down near the base, 5-6 ounces on a bush or a tree, let's say. And that plant will now triple the amount of leaf mass. So all of those little new feeder roots that we grew will have a leaf that's connected to the other side. So now that bush, you can't see through it anymore. It's beautiful and amazing. The thickness of the cuticle of the leaf is better. Has a better fragrance. Flowers, we get people with in rose societies they send us pictures saying, you won't believe my roses and the fragrance in them now. All of those things become more powerful as the health of the plant comes up, and health is tied to roots.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with that anymore. And I think there is a shift that's been happening in the last few years, where, especially in the lawn care industry, where people are starting to wake up and see that they've got to look a little deeper than just grabbing the bag of NPK, and they've got to start looking at the root system, because that's where it all happens.
Yeah, and there's a new push into organic matter.
Yeah.
Using these soilless soils. I get calls all the time from cannabis growers saying, I've got mites, I've got mildew, I've got all these diseases. Well, they created that by planting the plant in a carbon material, tons. It's peat and biochar and humic, and there's 10 different carbon sources. The carbon-nitrogen ratio's off. Well, what do fungal, mycorrhiza or fungal components, anaerobic, they rot the material to make nutrients available. Well, if you get too much of that rot, then you get mildew feeding off the rot. And then once you have mildew, you have mites feeding off the mildew. So we come in, we apply our product, turn it aerobic again, plant grows, mildew and mites go away.
So in an area like this, especially in the Salt Lake City area, there's a newer-ish, last decade fungus that's just getting out of control. It's this NRS, this necrotic ring spot. And I love the idea that we can use good products to strengthen the roots and not have to, over time, not have to use fungicides that will come in and kill beneficial fungi. That people don't talk about that part of it. And so I'm always looking for solutions. How can we attack these fungal issues in a way that will actually, get to the core problem to help change the symptoms, but also not have. Some of the fungicides and insecticides that I've seen in the past. You just open a bag and it's terrible. The smell, they're flaky. There's a lot that's uncomfortable for those applying it. Mm-hmm. It's flaky, it's dusty, and so I think there's a big hole there. I feel like this product could solve that problem. And so could you tell me a little bit about, if I have a lawn, and I'm going to talk a little bit specifically about lawns, if I have a lawn that has a history of, let's just say, snow mold or some type of fungal thing, I've had it for the last 3 years, and I just find out about Carbon 1, in February, and the snow melts in March. Could you tell me a little bit about what my application schedule, or how can I use Carbon 1 to fight off or to undo that damage?
What's really nice, you just mix our stuff with water through a hose-end sprayer or through any type of sprayer, and you apply it. Very simple. If you get the ratio correct, 20 to 1 dilution. You could do 30 to 1, 50 to 100 to 1, but at least 20. Apply it one time, and that's it. It boosts the root system of the plant. It slows down the environment for anaerobic conditions where mildew would grow or molds. And it provides a biological support. Those three things will benefit the plant. One of the other factors, too, is especially when it comes to lawn, people that add compost to the lawn, great idea. Love compost, love adding more carbon material to the lawn. The downside is what's going to give up the energy for the biology to break down that compost and the usable nutrients. Has to be the plant. So if your plant's weak already, it's going to die. People blame it on, I had some sort of disease in it or whatever. No, it was just simply, if I deliver a Ferrari to your home and you can't make the payments, it's going to cost you some financial.
Yeah.
And
Doesn't
so,
help you.
right. And so the same way with using a lot of new composts or mycorrhiza products, which are fantastic in certain areas, certain places, it causes a cost to the plant in energy. And that's where our product comes in and supplements that. If you're going to use a compost, use our product with it. We'll deliver the energy to break that down. There are a few companies that are going this way by fermenting things. Yeah. Again, they're delivering $1 bills where we're delivering $1 million. Our product, there's nothing out there that has so much energy to it. It's such an amazing response. It's also safe that you could drink. That's the neat thing about our product.
Awesome. Now, I want to jump back, and I may have a few more questions on the product, but I want to jump back into the story. So we're like 08, 09. Here you are. You've invented this thing. It's taken you, I think you said 2 to 3 years to really get the recipe or the formula dialed in. Now, how do you get it to where it's on the market? Did you have many people who might be creating products or just curious, how do you get that product to, okay, I've got this, I think I got something special here. Obviously, you've done testing, and I've seen some of the results, and they look great. How did you get it onto the market? Did you have a partner come in and say, hey, I'll back you? How did that happen?
Well, I had a potato grower who was a partner, and we knew he grows in a very short growing period. So there's only 90 days for him to grow a crop. Most of the potato growers are growing what we'd say is about 15 to 16 ton of potato seed. Our guy was growing 35 ton. So he was able to grow twice as much in the same period of time simply by boosting the root system, not slowly like the weather does it, but overnight. So he was able to grow a much larger plant, healthier plant, and do that. I also had about $500,000 a year worth of sales from the previous product that I had sold.
What is that roughly? Do you want to tell us what that product was?
It went away.
Okay.
But
you had some capital in from that.
Yeah, so I had a lot of customers. I had about 175 customers that were looking for a replacement. And at the time, there was just nothing out there. People were pushing humic acids, but very few people understood much of what a humic acid was. When you have to get coal out of the ground, there's some stuff above it called bituminous coal, and there's a layer of that called linardite. And then they take the linardite, they mix it with some fertilizers to react it, and it becomes humic acid. Not really humic acid, but it's a close substitute of it. Some people argue over the value of it.
Absolutely.
However, I've seen fields that are normal commercial fertilizer type fields, they put humic acid on, and yield increases, quality increases, disease pressure goes down. So I'm a firm believer in that. I didn't like the idea of mixing a bunch of fertilizers with it. To me, it seemed like it didn't make sense. So I looked at certain companies. There's a couple companies that don't do that. They do other things. And so I kind of became an expert on humic acid. And then there's a product called fulvic acid, which is the energy carrier. It's an electrolyte of the mixture. And then there's another product called ulvic, which is even rarer. and that has certain attributes to it. So if you have these three components and you use them in various ways, you get great results. I got into understanding fertilizers and why some become salts and the benefits. A lot of people value phosphate for root growth. Well, if you look at phosphate in the Western Fertilizer Handbook, it's only used in green leafy material. It's used for ATP, which is the process of making energy in a cell, but that's reused in the citric acid cycle. So phosphate, how is it growing roots if it's only used in the green leafy material? Well, it has oxygen, it has energy. Both of those things are great for root growth. Oxygen and energy is the main components for root growth. So that's why phosphate works. You add it, it decomposes, gives off some energy, gives off some oxygen. You get root growth. But you also get phosphate, which is a salt, which is toxic, bad in the water source. So we wanted to basically make this product separate from the nutrient side. Rather than if I deliver pizza to your house all the time, a lot of my analogies have pizza in it. I don't know, it's a challenge for me. But if I deliver pizza all the time to you, the boxes are become an issue. At some point, you won't be able to get around all the boxes. But if I deliver pizza without a box, you eat it, there's nothing left over. When you deliver energy via carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, there's no leftover components. There's no toxic salts. There's no waste product. It all gets used. But if I deliver energy via nitrogen, phosphate, potassium, I end up with a salt at the end, which becomes toxic to the plant and toxic to us and to the water streams. And so we're able to clean up. We sent some product to California to a dairy that had really bad soil. We actually have a product we put in dairy lagoons and winery lagoons to digest the material. We were able to clean up the soil with 5 gallons per acre. We dropped it from 1,000 parts per million nitrate to 90. And I use the example, another food example. If you have too much peanut butter at your house, and I bring over some friends with some jelly and a bread and a knife, you're not going to have a peanut butter problem anymore. Right. So our product is the balance to the nutrient programs. So everybody's using nutrients. We bring in the carbon. Now we've balanced those two. We get health out of it. And that's where long-term in the big picture, we're cleaning up the nitrate issues, the phosphate issues. As we introduce carbon, the other products, the other nutrients are going to be needed by the plant more. And so we take them up, utilize them, and it's better for everybody.
And I love it, and I agree with all the theories behind it. And I hope, I got involved in lawn care with this most recent company for that reason, to clean up the industry. You know, it's almost scary what is going on out there with some of these products, the way the homeowners are not understanding and applying incorrectly. Some companies are doing that. And so I love that here's someone who's not a scientist but was able to invent this product and even bring it to market and make it available for the rest of us who have a desire to get better results for our customers and clean up our act, so to speak. In winding down, I want to ask you, I guess this is going to be a little bit of a harder question. So just like compost tea and just like humic acid that we've talked about, it's a hot topic. I mean, you could go into a room of 100 lawn care professional master gardeners, and you may have 50 people swear that compost tea is garbage, and I know that because I've spent a lot of years in it. And you may have the other 50 say it's the greatest thing in the world, we should all be doing it. I have noticed as this conversation of carbon has come up over the last 8 to 9 years, like you said, it wasn't as much a conversation in the lawn care industry as it is getting more and more so. And I think the future it's going to be even more so. I have noticed online, blogs, same type of reaction. Some people swear by it. Some people will go on and say it is garbage, right? Have you seen that?
I have.
Okay, because I've seen that and I've experienced it. And at the end of the day, all we can do is say, this is what I know. I've been applying it. I'm having great results. Mm-hmm. What would you say to that question, right? So what would you say to that argument if I said, Doug, I don't know, this carbon one, this compost tea, this stuff, In fact, the argument I saw was you have to stick with science, is what people were saying.
Right.
This, and I love that. Well, a whole nother story, but I've been shut down by professors at universities who said that what we're working on is not science because it's not, hasn't been around for 30 years and they don't teach the same thing. Anyway, what would you say to that? To anyone out there who's a skeptic going, I don't know.
That's a good question. Yeah, the neat thing about our product is if you bring in the product aspect to the carbon, there's no downside. You try it. If you don't see a response, you don't see a response. There's no negative. You put fertilizer on, or many of the other products, and you can have a lot of negatives. Going back to the compost tea, I sat down with a guy, very well known in Washington State, one of the top compost tea guys, taught it and still makes a bunch. And he got up and walked out of the restaurant after 5 minutes of us discussing stuff. He did come back in, and we continued. But I upset him with some of the thoughts, but it was because I was right. And he said, I think about this. We're trying to do some things that's against the normal way of fertilizing plants. And this is in crops, potatoes and grapes and a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of benefits to using compost tea, for instance, just keeping away biology that is harmful to the plant. The downside is the inconsistency. Exactly. You can't control the variables of the plant. If I deliver 8 or 10 5-year-olds to your house without cake or without some sort of food source,
it's chaos.
It is total chaos, and the results will not be great. And so you have to deliver a food source with any consumers that you're delivering. So if I use a biological product, there's lots of great ones out there, and I put it on a field, and the salts had been used too much, the fertilizer had been applied too much, and so you have a salt. I'm going to see a great response because I'm going to get to a balance using biology to break those salts down. Kelp is another good one, right? The enzyme on kelp has to have 30% salt solution, so it breaks those salts down. If I go onto a field where they've not used any fertilizer, no-till sort of process, and I add biology, I'm going to make it worse because there's no longer a balance. Right. So the understanding along with the right timings, those all matter. And with compost tea, if you're adding carbon back into the system, that's a benefit. If you're adding carbon back in without a food source, it could be a benefit or not. So you have these inconsistent values. So there's a lot of people that are now adding materials with the compost tea to get that balance. Right. And the first year, you get the balance. The second year, you're over balance. You're too far. And so there's this oscillating process where you're going from the fertilizer program, which is beneficial, feeds billions of people, to the biological carbon sequestration side. Same as you have the plant growing foliar and you have the roots growing down. Both need each other, and it's about the balance. The roots balance with the top. So if you push roots, it'll balance the top. If you push top, it won't always balance with the roots.
Which is what's often happening in the industry. Everybody's pushing top growth.
Nutrients push top. And so, again, if somebody has a question about the value of what they're doing, you can see the difference. When you apply it, are you getting consistent results with using nitrogen all the time? One point you mentioned earlier, over the last 10 years, we've had this issue of the necrotic ring spot. Yeah. That's kind of self-imposed. So over the last 10 years, it's been getting warmer. We've had this heat increase. I think down to 2 years ago, it started to cool down again. This is a cycle, a 40-year cycle. We were going into an ice age in 76, right? And then the cycle ended, and now it's this heat process over 30 years. So the last 10 years have been really warm here. So people are having to apply more nutrient fertilizer. That's causing an imbalance in the soil, weakening the root system. The more fertilizer you use, the weaker the root system is. And then they have to come in and fight against necrotic ring spot, which is simply there to take out the weak plants. Fairy ring is another one. Mildew, snow mold, powdery mildew's been a big thing. All of these are secondary that come in to take out a weak plant. And as it starts to cool down again, we've had this cooling trend last 2 years, and it's going to go on again. We're going to have to switch back to now applying different materials based on what the weather does. Weather controls the biology, biology controls the plant. So if you're not treating for the weather, then you're not treating the plant correctly. And there's a challenge in that. Our product, again, is providing the plant with energy to feed the biology, to get the nutrients. It's back to what nature does. We're just bypassing the photosynthesis process of the plant.
And I love that. And kind of in wrapping up this idea, one of the words that's jumped out to me the most during this interview is balance. And you've said this many times, and I believe in balance so much. And that's why I started doing what I did, is because I felt like we were all focused on the top growth, because that's what customers see, right?
Yep.
They come home, they don't look at the root system. They don't know what's going on below. So they see that top growth and think, oh, I got a healthy lawn. Well, you may have a green lawn. It doesn't mean you have a healthy lawn or plant. And so I am on board. I love the concept of balance. And I think as we move into the future, and hopefully more and more people are really striving for balance and cleaning up our act in the industry, using better products, that we'll see more and more of this concept of utilizing the carbon combined with other organic soil conditioners, the humic acids, the compost teas, these type of things. And hopefully, our result will be a more sustainable lawn care plan for everybody. Great story. I love that you've shared, just inventing this product and working hard, and I love what it's become. And so as we wrap up, is there anything else that I haven't asked you, or something that you want to share with us? Or do you feel like we've kind of covered everything?
Just one thing I think we've done pretty well. We have C1, which we use to put on the soil to apply, and you could really use it on anything. But it does have a dark color to it, so it tends to stain the plant unless you rinse it off afterwards. We have a clear C1, which doesn't. We can spray on float foliar. So if you go to one of the big hotel chains that has all the flowers, they spray it on the flowers. They don't have to rinse it off again. And then we have a tree product, which is clear. Okay. Our product is pretty much clear if you take 2 items out of it. And so we also have another product called Brix Booster. What happens is in the summer, the plant is under a lot of heat stress. It's losing all of its energy, so it's not bulking fruit. It's not looks kind of overwhelmed. Okay. We have a product you can spray on foliar, mixes with water, and it will boost and green that plant overnight. And it'll stay green for about 14 days in the heat. And then it, of course, runs out. And we're able to bulk fruit. We're able to make plants look healthy. Chlorosis, it kind of resolves the chlorosis issue for about 14 days. It's a temporary fix. But if you think about it, there's only about 30 hot days through the summer, maybe 6 weeks. Yeah. And so if you could use it 3 times, you get that plant through that point. So we use it a lot in crops with apples and pears and cherries when they would normally drop their fruit from the heat.
And to a customer, that's the hard, if we can keep their properties looking good through that 30, that 6 weeks. And so here's another tool that we can use to bounce back something. And they see, you came out and applied it, and within a few days, things look significantly better. It's going to make you look great. Yep. And that's awesome. Awesome. Well, Doug, thank you for coming in. We're going to, below on this episode, there's a link to your website. And also the contact info that you've provided will be there as well. So if anybody has more questions or wants to get in touch with Doug, I'll have that information on the link below. Yeah, go ahead.
One point. We have the ability on our website that they can do a chat with me. So they can schedule it in my calendar, and they can do a Zoom conference where they can see me. I can see their trees or plants. They can do a FaceTime with me, and I can see and advise them on it. We also are doing 50% off for January of all of our products, all the fertilizer products. So it's a huge savings. In some cases, it's $60 to $70 off per gallon. So we would encourage people to get a hold of me, and I can answer questions. In some cases, if I'm in town or something, I'll come out and take a look at different homes and give them advice.
But you would do it sounds like you're willing to help out virtually or digitally,
Yes.
via chat, via Zoom, these type of things. Awesome. So he's available if you want to dig in. I hope you've learned a bit today. I've been in this industry for 20 years, and I actually learned quite a bit today. So I'm excited. I'm excited about getting my own Carbon One going into my program and start testing it out. And for those of you, like we mentioned earlier, some are very skeptical about this concept of bringing in the carbon and looking at the lawn or plant from this angle. Try it out. That's what he's saying. I mean, it's I've looked at the pricing and the amounts that you have to put down, and it is affordable. And I think, listening to this episode and hearing all these benefits, I think it's absolutely worth a try. Worst case scenario, you may not see the result that you want, but Doug's confident that you will see the result that you want, and he's here to talk to you if you need help or assistance.
Even when added wrong, it has a great response, and it's an immediate response.
Awesome.
2 to 3 weeks.
And as you know, it's all about speed during the season. The customers want things right away. So, Doug, thank you so much, and thank you guys for listening, and be sure to check out those links. Have a great day, and we'll see you on the next episode.